The moment my parents handed me that thin white envelope, I knew something was wrong. Not because of what they said, but because of how they wouldn't look me in the eye. My sister was standing beside them, grinning, clutching a thick gold folder with a luxury airline logo stamped across it, the kind you see in commercials, the kind that screams first-class champagne comfort. Mine felt light. Too light. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what was inside. I could feel it in the way my mother's fingers trembled when she let go of it, in the way my father cleared his throat and said, "It's still a ticket, you should be grateful." Grateful. That word burned like acid in my chest. Because right then I realized something painful. This wasn't just about a trip. This was about how they had always seen me, and how fate was about to see them very differently. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or treated like you mattered less than someone else, you're not alone. My name is Alison Reed, and this story is about betrayal inside a family, and the kind of justice that no one sees coming. So if stories like this hit close to home, make sure you stay with me until the end. Because what happened after that ticket changed everything. And it started long before that envelope touched my hands. I've always been the responsible one. The quiet one, the dependable one, the one who didn't cause trouble. Growing up, my sister Rachel was the sun in our family's universe. Everything revolved around her moods, her needs, her dreams. Rachel was loud, charming, magnetic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and have everyone orbiting her within minutes. I was background noise. The kid who did the dishes without being asked. The one who stayed up late helping Dad with bills when he struggled. The one who comforted Mom when she cried about money. But appreciation, that was never part of the equation. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Rachel got praise for existing. I got silence for sacrificing. It wasn't always obvious. That's the cruel part. It wasn't like they openly hated me. No, that would have been easier to deal with. Instead, it was subtle. The birthday gifts that were always slightly better for her. The excuses they made when she failed classes, but the lectures I got when I got anything less than perfect. The way they called her our pride and me our reliable one. Reliable. As if I were a tool. Not a daughter. But I swallowed it all, for years. Because I believed one thing. That if I worked hard enough, loved them enough, sacrificed enough, one day they'd see me. Really see me. That illusion shattered the night they announced the big trip. We were sitting at the dinner table. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but something about the room felt electric, like a storm waiting to break. Dad cleared his throat. "So," he said, smiling at Rachel, "we've decided to celebrate your engagement with something special." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Engagement. Rachel hadn't even told me she was engaged. She flashed her hand dramatically, showing off a massive diamond ring. "Oh my God, you didn't know," she laughed. "Oops." That oops was sharp, deliberate. Like a needle sliding under skin. Mom clapped her hands excitedly. "We're sending Rachel and Daniel on a luxury trip to Europe, first-class flights, 5-star hotels. It's a once-in-a-lifetime gift." My chest tightened. I forced a smile. "That's amazing." Then Dad looked at me. "And you," he said, "we didn't want you to feel left out, so we got you something too." That's when they handed me the envelope. Back to that moment. Back to the weight in my hands that felt like nothing. I finally opened it. Inside was a single economy ticket. One way. To a completely different city. Not Europe. Not a vacation. A one-way flight to a place 3,000 miles away. No returns. No hotels. No explanation. Just a printed line that said, "Departure Monday." I stared at it confused. "What is this?" Mom smiled nervously. "We thought it would be good for you, a fresh start. There are more job opportunities there." My stomach dropped. They weren't sending me on a trip. They were sending me away. Rachel leaned back in her chair, sipping wine, watching me with a smug little smile. "You've always been so independent," she said. "You'll be fine." Fine. That word felt like a slap. My voice came out shaky. You're kicking me out." Dad frowned. "Don't be dramatic, we're helping you." "Helping me?" "By buying me a one-way ticket to leave the only home I'd ever known. Because Rachel was getting married, and apparently there wasn't room for me anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me slowly crack open. Not sadness, not even anger. Something colder. A realization that I had been blind for years. This wasn't sudden. This was the final step in a lifetime of being pushed aside. And for the first time in my life, I stopped wanting their approval. I started wanting something else. Answers, and maybe justice. But I had no idea yet that this cheap, one-way ticket they handed me so casually was about to become the biggest mistake they would ever make. Because fate had plans none of us saw coming, and what happened next would turn the entire family upside down. I didn't tell them how much it hurt. Not that night. Not the next morning when Mom casually asked if I'd started packing. Not when Rachel walked past me humming happily while scrolling through luxury hotel photos on her phone. I stayed quiet. But inside something had changed. It was like a switch flipped in my chest. For years I'd chased their approval. I'd bent myself into impossible shapes trying to be enough, trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. Now all I felt was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. They weren't pushing me away because of money. They weren't doing it for my future. They were doing it because I had never mattered the way Rachel did. And once you truly see something like that, you can't unsee it. The days before the flight felt surreal. I moved through the house like a ghost, watching everything with new eyes. I noticed how Mom hovered around Rachel constantly, fussing over travel outfits and skincare routines. I noticed how Dad kept bragging to relatives on the phone. "Our Rachel is flying first class," he'd say proudly. "It's a dream trip." Not once did he mention me. Not once. I packed my things quietly. Each item felt heavier than it should have. Every photo, every book, every small piece of my life. I wasn't just packing to move. I was packing to erase myself from their world. One evening, 3 days before departure, I overheard something that changed everything. I was in the hallway outside the kitchen when I heard my parents whispering. "It's for the best," Mom was saying, her voice tense. Dad sighed. "Rachel needs the house after the wedding. Daniel wants to move in. We can't have both daughters here." My stomach dropped. So that was it. Not money. Not opportunity. They were clearing space for Rachel's new life. And I was excess. Unnecessary. Disposable. Mom spoke again, softer this time. "She'll manage, she always does. Allison is strong." Strong. I almost laughed. They weren't sending me away despite loving me. They were sending me away because they knew I wouldn't fight back. Because I was strong enough to absorb the damage. I walked back to my room in a daze. That night, something inside me hardened completely. I stopped crying. I stopped hopping. And I started planning. But fate didn't wait for my plan. It struck first. The day of the flight arrived. The airport was crowded, noisy, full of rolling suitcases and excited voices. Rachel stood near the check-in counter, wearing a designer travel set, sunglasses perched on her head like she was already a celebrity. She looked radiant. Untouchable. Mom and Dad hovered around her, taking photos, hugging her, telling her how proud they were. I stood off to the side with my small suitcase. Invisible. Just like always. Finally, Dad turned to me. "Your gate is in the other terminal," he said quickly. "You should go now." No hug. No goodbye. Just dismissal. I nodded. But as I turned away, something unexpected happened. A voice called out, "Miss Allison Reed." I froze. A man in a dark airline uniform was walking toward me, holding a tablet. "Yes," I said cautiously. He smiled politely. "There's been a change regarding your ticket. Could you please come with me?" My parents looked confused. Rachel frowned. "What change?" she snapped. The man glanced at her briefly, then back at me. "It's confidential," he said. My heart started pounding. I followed him through a side corridor, away from the crowd. My mind raced with possibilities. Was there a mistake, a cancellation? Had something gone wrong? We stopped at a private lounge door. The man gestured for me to enter. "Please," he said. I stepped inside. And everything changed. The room was quiet, elegant, glowing with soft golden lighting. Leather chairs, glass walls overlooking the runway, attendants moving silently with trays of drinks. A first-class lounge. I stared in confusion. "There must be a mistake," I whispered. The airline manager, standing near the desk, looked up and smiled warmly. "No mistake, Ms. Reed," she said. Then she handed me a new ticket. Thick gold, heavy. Nothing like the thin paper envelope from my parents. My hands trembled as I read it. First class. International. Destination, London. Round trip. Luxury accommodation included. My mind went blank. This isn't mine," I stammered. The manager shook her head gently. "It is," she said. "This ticket was purchased under a special request from a benefactor." "A benefactor?" My throat went dry. "Who?" I asked. She smiled softly. "He asked that you read his letter first." She handed me an envelope. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. The moment I saw the signature at the bottom, my knees nearly gave out. Because it was a name I hadn't heard in years. A name my parents never spoke about. A name tied to a family secret. A name that changed everything. My grandfather. The one they had cut off. The one they said abandoned us. The one who, according to this letter, had been watching me all along. And what he wrote next made my heart pound so loudly I could barely breathe. Because this wasn't just a gift. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would soon turn my entire family's world upside down. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down before I could finish reading. The paper felt thick, expensive, nothing like the cheap stationery my parents used at home. Even the ink looked deliberate, bold, confident, like the person who wrote it never doubted his place in the world. I hadn't seen my grandfather since I was 10. All I remembered were whispers, arguments behind closed doors, my mother crying, my father shouting that he was cutting ties for good. The official story was simple. He abandoned us, Mom had always said coldly whenever I asked. He chose money over family. So I stopped asking. But now I was holding proof that the story wasn't that simple at all. The letter began, "Allison, if you are reading this, it means your parents have finally done what I always feared they would do. They've pushed you aside. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've watched this pattern for years, quietly, from a distance. You remind me of someone. Me." My throat tightened. The words blurred for a moment as tears welled up, not from sadness this time, from something deeper, something unfamiliar. Being seen. Really seen. The letter continued. "I built everything our family has from nothing. I know what strength looks like. And from the day you helped me carry those heavy boxes in my workshop when you were just 9 years old, I knew you had it. But your parents never valued strength. They valued comfort, image, easy pride. And your sister became their reflection. My heart pounded harder with every line. So when they cut me off years ago, it wasn't because I abandoned them. It was because I refused to give them control over what I built. I refused to let them turn my legacy into a reward system based on favoritism. I warned them that one day they would regret how they treated you. They laughed. I swallowed hard. My hands clenched around the letter. I have waited many years to step back into your life. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to see whether you would become bitter or strong. You chose strength. So now it is time you learn the truth. Everything they believe belongs to them. Doesn't it? My pulse thundered in my ears. The last line hit me like a lightning strike. They may have given you a cheap ticket, but I am giving you something far more powerful. Your rightful place. Signed, Grandfather Henry Reed. I sat frozen. My entire understanding of my family shifted in that moment. This wasn't just about favoritism. This was about something much bigger. Something hidden. Something my parents had lied about for years. And now it was unraveling. The airline manager watched me carefully. "Would you like some water?" she asked gently. I nodded, still stunned. Once I took a sip, I finally managed to speak. What does he mean by everything they believe belongs to them? She hesitated, then said quietly, "Your grandfather owns several major properties, investment portfolios, and controlling shares in a manufacturing company your father currently manages." The words didn't register at first. "What?" She continued calmly. "Your father isn't the owner of his company, Ms. Reed. He is an employee. Your grandfather retained full ownership after the family dispute." My stomach dropped. All those years. All the times Dad had talked about his company, his authority, his power. It wasn't his at all. It had never been. And he had never told me. Or Rachel. The manager leaned slightly closer. He recently amended his will. My heart stopped. And she met my eyes. "You are now the primary heir." The world went silent. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Primary heir? Me. Not Rachel. Not my parents. Me. All the years of being invisible. All the years of being overlooked. All the nights crying alone. And now, everything was flipping. In one instant. My chest filled with a strange, powerful sensation. Not joy. Not exactly. It felt like justice slowly rising after years buried under the weight of unfairness. And then reality hit. My family. They had no idea. At that very moment, they were probably still standing near Rachel's check-in counter, proud and confident in the belief that she was the golden child destined to inherit everything. I imagined their faces if they knew the truth. The thought sent a cold, electric thrill down my spine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't powerless. I had leverage. And something else. A choice. I could disappear quietly. Start fresh somewhere far away. Or I could stay. And watch the truth unfold. Watch the people who underestimated me face the consequences. The manager spoke again. "Your grandfather has arranged for you to meet him in London. He would like to discuss your future personally." Future. The word echoed in my mind. For the first time, it didn't feel like something uncertain. It felt like something within my control. I looked down at the gold ticket in my hands, then at the letter, then out the window at the massive aircraft waiting on the runway. A slow, steady determination settled inside me. I wasn't just boarding a plane. I was stepping into a new life. And when I came back, everything would be different. Because my parents thought they had sent me away. But they had actually handed me the one thing they never meant to give: power. And soon, they were going to learn exactly what it felt like to be the one left behind. The first time I sat in a first-class seat, I didn't feel excited. I felt quiet, still, like the storm inside me had finally found a center. Soft leather cradled my body. A flight attendant handed me a warm towel with a gentle smile. Champagne shimmered in a crystal glass beside me. Everything felt surreal, because just 2 hours earlier, I had been standing at another gate holding a cheap, one-way economy ticket, believing I was being pushed out of my own family forever. Now I was flying toward the truth they had hidden my entire life, and toward a man they had painted as a villain. My grandfather. The flight felt like stepping between two worlds. Above the clouds, I finally had space to think. And when I thought back on my childhood, the memories started rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces snapping into place. Mom always avoided talking about Grandpa Henry. Whenever his name came up, she got tense. Dad would immediately change the subject. Rachel used to joke that he was probably some evil rich old man hoarding money. At the time, I believed them, because that's what children do. They trust the narrative they're given. But now, looking back, I remembered things differently. I remembered how Grandpa had always listened when I spoke, how he taught me how to fix broken things instead of throwing them away, how he once told me quietly while we worked in his workshop, "People show you who they are by how they treat the ones who have nothing to offer them." But I hadn't understood the weight of those words back then. Now they echoed in my mind with painful clarity, because my parents had shown exactly who they were the moment they decided I was no longer useful to their picture-perfect life. When I landed in London, a driver was waiting for me with a small sign that read, "Ms. Reed." Everything felt formal, precise, controlled, like stepping into a world that operated on entirely different rules. The car ride through the city was quiet, the streets glowing under soft evening lights. Rain tapped gently against the windows. I felt like I was moving toward something inevitable, something that had been waiting for me for years. We finally stopped outside a large estate on the outskirts of the city. The gates alone were massive, elegant wrought iron, polished to a mirror shine. As they opened slowly, my heartbeat sped up. This wasn't just wealth. This was legacy. The driver opened the door and spoke softly. "He's been waiting for you." My legs felt unsteady as I stepped out. I walked up the stone path, each step echoing in my ears. And then the front door opened. He stood there. Older, of course. His hair completely silver now, lines carved deep into his face. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, warm. The same eyes I remembered from childhood. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. And in that smile, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. "Alison," he said quietly. My throat closed. "Grandpa's." The next second, he pulled me into a hug. Strong, solid, real. Not the polite, distant hugs I'd gotten from my parents for years. This one felt like home. And suddenly I broke. All the pain I had held in for years rushed out in silent tears. He didn't ask me to stop. He just held me, like he already understood everything. Later we sat in his study. The room smelled faintly of wood and old books. A fireplace crackled softly. He poured tea for both of us. For a while we just sat in silence. Then he spoke. "I'm sorry you had to find out the truth this way." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me before?" He sighed. "Because your parents cut all contact, legally and personally, and you were a minor. I couldn't reach you without causing a war that would have dragged you into the middle." His expression hardened slightly. But I watched from a distance, through mutual contacts, through company reports, through quiet inquiries. My heart tightened. "You knew how they treated me." He nodded slowly. I suspected, but I needed to be sure before stepping back in, because once I did, there would be no turning back. I felt a chill run down my spine. No turning back. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. Your parents believe they control everything, the house, the company, the future inheritance. His eyes met mine. But they don't. A heavy silence filled the room. Your father runs my company, not his own. Your parents live in a property still legally owned by my trust. My breath caught. And now, he continued quietly, you are the majority beneficiary of that trust. The words landed slowly, like dominoes falling. Meaning, everything they believed was theirs, was actually mine. My hands trembled. What happens now? His gaze was calm but firm. That depends on you. I stared at him. For years you had no power, he said. Now you do, you can walk away and live peacefully. He paused. Or you can confront them, legally, directly, completely. My chest tightened. 1,000 emotions collided inside me. Hurt, anger, vindication. And something deeper. A quiet, burning need for justice. Not revenge out of cruelty, but accountability. Because they had never once faced consequences for how they treated me. Not once. Grandpa spoke again, softer this time. They underestimated you your entire life. They believed you would always accept whatever they gave. His eyes held mine. Are they right? The question hung in the air. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me completely. I thought of the cheap one-way ticket. Of being told to leave. Of being erased. I lifted my chin slowly. No, I whispered. His expression softened into a proud smile. Then, he said quietly, it's time they learned the truth. A calm, cold determination settled in my chest. Because the next time I saw my parents, they wouldn't be sending me away. They would be facing something they had never expected. Consequences. And what happened when I finally returned home was far more explosive than even I imagined. The moment I decided to go back, I stopped feeling like the same person. Something inside me had solidified. For years my life had been shaped by their choices, their preferences, their version of reality. Now, for the first time, I was writing the script. And I wasn't going to do it impulsively. I was going to do it carefully. Precisely. So that when the truth came out, it would land like thunder. Over the next 2 weeks in London, my world transformed. Not in a flashy, dramatic way, but in a quiet, powerful one. Grandpa didn't treat me like someone who had just inherited wealth. He treated me like someone who had inherited responsibility. Every morning we sat together reviewing documents, company structures, property ownership, trust agreements, legal frameworks. At first the information overwhelmed me. My head would spin from terms and numbers and charts. But Grandpa was patient. Power without understanding is dangerous, he'd say calmly. If you're going to take control, you need to know exactly how everything works. And slowly, I began to understand. The house my parents lived in, still under his trust. The company my father proudly called his. He only held a management position. He owned nothing. Rachel's future wedding fund, partially sourced from accounts, technically tied to the same trust. Meaning, everything they relied on, everything they believed was secure, rested on a foundation they didn't control. And now that foundation had shifted to me. The realization didn't make me feel greedy. It made me feel steady. Like I finally had a solid ground under my feet after years of standing on emotional quicksand. One evening, Grandpa asked me quietly, "What do you want, Alison?" Not what I should do. Not what he expected. What I wanted. The question hit deeper than anything else. Because for years, no one had asked me that. I stared into the fireplace flames, thinking carefully. I don't want to hurt them, I said slowly, but I want them to understand what they did. My voice grew firmer. I want them to face consequences, real ones, not just words they can ignore. Grandpa nodded. That's justice, he said. Not revenge. Justice. And suddenly I knew exactly how to proceed. The plan wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, legal, unavoidable. We began by initiating a formal ownership review. All perfectly legitimate. No surprises. Just paperwork moving through official channels. Letters sent. Meetings requested. Documents verified. On the surface it looked routine. But I knew what it would trigger. Because my father's position depended entirely on appearing in control. And the moment official notices started arriving, that illusion would crack. 2 weeks later I flew back home. This time not in fear. Not in exile. But with purpose. When I stepped into the familiar neighborhood, everything looked the same. The same quiet streets. The same trimmed lawns. The same house where I had spent my entire life feeling invisible. But I felt completely different. Like I was walking into a stage where the roles had quietly reversed. I didn't knock. I used my key. The front door opened with the same soft creak. Voices drifted from the living room. Excited. Happy. Rachel was back from her luxury trip. I stepped inside. And what I saw stopped me for a moment. Suitcases full of designer shopping bags. Expensive gifts spread across the couch. Rachel laughing loudly while showing photos on her phone. Mom smiling proudly. Dad relaxed, confident, comfortable. Like nothing had changed. Like I had never mattered. Rachel was the first to notice me. Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh," she said casually, "you're back already." Already. As if I'd only been gone for a short errand. Not sent away like an inconvenience. Mom stood quickly. "Allison, you didn't tell us you were returning." Her tone wasn't warm. It was cautious. Dad frowned. "We thought you'd stay longer. You said you were starting fresh." I closed the door slowly behind me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that house. I felt calm. Grounded. In control. "I did start fresh," I said quietly. Rachel crossed her arms. "So why are you back?" I met her eyes. "Because this is still my home." The room went silent. Dad's expression hardened. "Let's not start drama," he said sharply. "We already explained the situation." I looked at him steadily. "Yes," I replied. "You did." Then I placed a small folder on the table. The same kind of thick, formal folder Rachel had proudly held weeks earlier. Only this one carried something very different. Authority. Dad frowned. "What's this?" My voice stayed calm. "Legal documentation." He opened it. At first his expression was confused. Then it shifted. Slowly. From confusion. To disbelief. To fear. Because inside that folder was a simple, undeniable truth. Ownership transfer notices. Trust beneficiary confirmations. Company restructuring documents. All legally binding. All final. All naming one person. Me. His hands began to tremble. Rachel leaned over his shoulder, reading quickly. Her face drained of color. Mom whispered weakly. What is this?" I took a slow breath. And finally said the words I had carried inside me for years. You sent me away because you believed I had nothing. I met each of their eyes one by one. But everything you thought was yours. I paused. Was never yours to begin with. The silence that followed felt like an earthquake frozen in time. And in that moment, for the first time in my entire life, they looked at me not with dismissal, but with something they had never shown me before. Respect and fear. But the real fallout had only just begun. No one spoke for a long time. The silence felt thick, suffocating, like the air itself had turned heavy. My father's hands shook as he flipped through the pages again and again, as if the words might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. They didn't. Because legal truth doesn't bend to denial. Rachel was the first to break. This is fake, she snapped, her voice rising. It has to be. Dad owns the company. Everyone knows that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. It's all verified, I said calmly. You can call the corporate office or your lawyer, they already know. My father's face had gone pale, his lips trembled slightly. Because he knew. He knew it was real. For years, he had relied on the assumption that my grandfather would never interfere again. That the old conflict was buried forever. And now, it had resurfaced in the one person he had least expected. Me. Mom sank into a chair, whispering, Alison, why would you do this to us? The question almost made me laugh. Do this to them. For a moment, the old pain flared inside me. All the nights crying alone. All the years of feeling invisible. The cheap one-way ticket sitting on my bed. The quiet conversations about clearing space for Rachel. My voice came out steady. I didn't do anything to you. I held her gaze. You did this yourselves. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Dad finally looked up at me. Not with anger. Not with authority. But with something raw. Fear. What do you want? He asked quietly. That question hung in the air. It wasn't just a practical question. It was the same question Grandpa had asked me weeks earlier. What do you want? For years I thought I wanted their love. Their approval. Their acknowledgement. But standing there, watching them crumble under the weight of truth, I realized something. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind that destroys. I wanted something deeper. Understanding. Accountability. And balance. I took a slow breath. I want honesty, I said. My voice was calm but firm. No more pretending, no more rewriting history, no more treating me like I don't matter. Rachel scoffed, though her voice shook. This is ridiculous, you're acting like some victim. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time I didn't feel small next to her. I felt clear. You got everything, I said quietly. Attention, support, opportunities, and you never once questioned why. Her expression faltered. Because deep down, she knew. I turned back to my parents. You didn't just give me a cheap ticket, I continued. You tried to erase me, to make me disappear so your perfect life could continue without inconvenience. Mom started crying softly. Dad closed his eyes. The truth had nowhere left to hide. The next few weeks were brutal for them. The company announced a restructuring. My father was formally reassigned under new leadership oversight. Which meant he was no longer the man in control. The house ownership review came next. They weren't being thrown out. But for the first time, they had to face the reality that their security depended on someone they had underestimated their entire lives. Me. Rachel's wedding plans hit turbulence too. Not cancelled, but scaled back. Because the unlimited financial safety net she assumed would always exist now had conditions. Real ones. For them, it felt like everything was collapsing. For me, it felt like equilibrium being restored. One evening a month later, my father knocked on my door. Not barged in. Knocked. That alone felt surreal. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded. We sat in the living room. For the first time in my life he looked smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. "I was wrong," he said. The words came slowly, like they were heavy. I thought strength meant control, authority, success. He swallowed hard. "But you showed me something else." His voice cracked slightly. "You showed me what real strength looks like." I didn't respond right away, because hearing those words didn't erase the past. But it mattered. It meant something had shifted. Mom came next. Then Rachel. Not with dramatic apologies, but with something quieter. Acknowledgement. Awkward attempts to understand. And for the first time, they listened when I spoke. Really listened. Years later, when I think back to that cheap one-way ticket, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel something strange. Gratitude. Because that moment, as painful as it was, forced the truth into the open. It ended the illusion. It gave me power. And more importantly, it gave me my voice. My parents didn't lose everything, but they lost the arrogance that had allowed them to treat love like a hierarchy. Rachel didn't lose her life, but she lost the blind entitlement she had never questioned. And I didn't get revenge. I got something far better. Respect, balance, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the girl they once tried to send away ended up holding the power to redefine the entire family's future. So if you've ever felt overlooked, remember this. Sometimes the smallest, most humiliating moments are actually turning points. Because fate has a way of rewriting the story, right when people think they already know the ending. And in my case, that cheap ticket wasn't an Excel. It was the first step toward justice. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or pushed aside, don't forget to stay connected. My name is Alison Reed, and I share stories like this to remind you that strength isn't about being loud. It's about standing firm when the truth finally comes to light.